Hi there, brilliant people. So today I want to talk about the three types of exchange and what we can learn from them. And hopefully we can help you get more towards an exchange that's really going to work for you. All right, so let's get into it. So what are the three kinds of exchange? Now, this is pretty straightforward if you think about it. Essentially we have being out of exchange, which is when we're giving more than we're getting. We're in exchange, where we give as much as we get. And then there's mutually expansive exchange, whereby what we give to the other person, allows them to expand, and at the same time what they give to us allows us to expand. So we both feel like we're getting really a great deal out of it. Okay, so let's have a bit of a deeper look into each one of these things. So let's start with being out of exchange, because unfortunately this is often where a lot of us start. Now, whether we start there because of our conditioning and we're always being told that you have to that there's no such thing as a free lunch, and you've got to work hard, and your life wasn't meant to be easy. Whatever kind of conditioning or life circumstances went into it, whether it's simply the fact that growing up we often had to do things that on one level we didn't want to do. The problem is that whether it's because of dysfunction in families or just a general sort of limited kind of thinking, a lot of the times as we're growing up, that is almost what we're trained to do. We're trained to actually outflow and not necessarily really expect a lot back. And that's very demoralizing. It does tend to encourage us to discount our own value. And also, of course, it's exhausting. I mean, if everything that you do means that you end up a bit drained from it because the amount of energy you put into it, you get less than that back, well, it just means that life in the long term is just going to get harder and harder and harder. Now, some people might argue that, the law of entropy, that things just tend to break down, or that's just aging, or, well, that's just the way it is. Yeah, that's the way it is until you start to understand that there are other things that you can do. Because generally, when we're giving more than what we're receiving, we are basically discounting, quite literally, our own value. And this tends to be what we do when we're still in a very codependent state. So that the more that we live in this way, where we're constantly out of exchange, it does mean that life is going to be hard. Those two things go hand in hand. When we're living in a way that we are out of exchange all the time, everything is constantly, literally taking from us. And so life just is hard. And that hardness, we can experience it, financially, obviously, but physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically. Whatever level we're out of exchange on, we will experience life as hard on that level. Right. So that sucks. So don't do that. So how do we get to move away from that? Well, actually, one of the things that I tell people is to learn to honor their resentment. Resentment's an interesting emotion. Yeah, it's a form of anger. It's kind of like a low-toned anger, in the sense that it's not like it's not a really big, aggressive, passionate anger. I suppose it's closer to annoyance than anger, but it is this sort of teeth gritting kind of feeling. And that is the reason why it's important for us to honor our resentment, because a lot of the times, just as we actually need anger for our boundaries, we need to, instead of when we're feeling resentful, instead of trying to suppress it, if we can acknowledge it for what it is, because what it is it's trying to alert us to the fact that we are out of exchange. That's why we feel resentful. And so if we can stop and consider the exchange and ask ourselves, well, how can I make this work better for me? So that we can renegotiate what the exchange is, you'll find that you won't feel so resentful. So it's that paradox. The more that we acknowledge how we're feeling and respond appropriately, well, the less we'll feel those negative emotions, but actually any positive emotions we have will get stronger. So by honoring your resentment, you will start to be out of exchange less. So that's a good start. Right. So when we stop being out of exchange, we move into being in exchange. So when we are in exchange, it means that we are getting as good as we're giving. But so this isn't the law of entropy. This is that other law about the fact that energy is not created or destroyed. But it's transformed from one form to another. Because really, that's all you're doing when you're in exchange. You're getting as good as you're giving. So you might give money and you get, groceries, but, it feels reasonable. Friendships, there's mutual support. This is all lovely. And of course, compared to being out of exchange, this is very satisfying. But unfortunately, it's kind of a bit boring, because even though when we are in exchange, rather than things sort of breaking down over time, like, entropy, everything breaking down, which is what happens when we're out of exchange. When we're in exchange, things do tend to maintain themselves, but they're not necessarily expanding, evolving, transforming. Because sure, whatever energy we have, we give it out, we get it back in a different form. So we experience that energy in a different way, but we're not really ending up with more energy. And so while that, on one level can be very satisfying, certainly in comparison to being out of exchange, but in another way it's a bit boring, because things aren't growing and expanding, and, where's the adventure in that? In just maintaining where we are. But that being in exchange is, for a lot of people, that seems so amazing, because they've lived so long being out of exchange, that they often don't go beyond that. They don't look at the third kind of exchange. So the third kind of exchange is actually being, having a mutually expansive exchange. So having a mutually expansive exchange is, it's actually through the exchange that, synergy happens. And as a consequence, all those involved in the exchange actually end up with more energy. Now, this might seem like magic, but it's not really, not when you understand it. And one of the simplest ways to understand it is, like, if I give you whatever it is, whatever little thing you need to take the next step in your journey, to connect in that next way to more of who you truly are, well, you are going to expand. And if in exchange you give me whatever little thing I need for me to take the next step in my journey, well, I'm also going to expand. So, that is what mutually expansive exchange looks like. If people want me to, I can do another video where I go into the mechanics of this much more deeply. But essentially, with mutually expansive exchange, because we're all getting the things that we need to go to the next level, we're all expanding, we're all growing. And if you think about it, well, the universe is constantly expanding. This is how life is meant to operate. This is actually what underlies evolution and the growing complexity and abundance of all things. So it seems to me like it's a good idea for all of us to live that way. So anyway, one of the things that marks that mutually expansive exchange is the fact that when we're living from that space, life gets easier. And so therefore, of course, life also gets more joyful. So the more that we live in mutually expansive exchange, the more we experience joy and the more capacity we have to share that joy as well. So that's the three types of exchange. Of course, what I wish for you is for you to start to experience and live from mutually expansive exchange, because that is not just going to be great for you, it's going to be great for everybody, including me. So do that, and as always, remember that you're brilliant.